How does a country go from a legacy of totalitarianism and a command economy to a capitalist society with free speech? The world was not expecting this to happen. So how did it?
The state of the Soviet Union and its society could be described very simply with a phrase used by people across the country. We can't go on living like this any longer.
The beginning of the end, Gorbachev's reform of Soviet communism. The Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 made Russia into the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, which would challenge democracy in the decades to come. There followed a series of oppressive and unyielding rulers. Then, in 1971, a new name appeared within communist influence. Mikhail Gorbachev initiated a new era of political philosophy in the Soviet Union. His reformative policies of glasnost and perestroika represent a turning point in Soviet leadership and collectively led to the slow collapse of the Soviet Union. Nikolai Smelev, one of the most radical economists at the time, commented, "At present our economy is characterized by shortages, imbalances, and the working masses have reached a state of almost total lack of interest in honest labor. Over the years, the government had failed to fully support society and its economy. The atmosphere was ripe for change, and Gorbachev stepped in." As long as it retained a command economy, the Soviet Union would fall further and further behind the rest of the developed world. Gorbachev saw that the USSR needed development of the scientific foundations and practice of planning the economy as the principal means of implementing the party's policy. He would call it perestroika, or restructuring. He started with uskorny, or acceleration. He said it was the key to all our problems. The acceleration involved increased investment in machinery-building industries and the development of technology. Alexander Yakovlev, an advisor of Gorbachev's, commented, "It seemed to us that all we had to do was to remove some prohibitions, some brakes, free up everything, and it would start to work. It would work." The government's relationship with people changed from being commanding to motivating. In June of 1987, Gorbachev introduced the idea behind the Law on State Enterprise, which was passed the next month. Later, the Law on Cooperatives was passed in May of 1988. These laws allowed private ownership of businesses and furthermore allowed corporations to adjust production levels based on demand from consumers. There was never any intention or premonition that the basis of Soviet society were at risk. The policy of glasnost came into effect after the poor handling of the Chernobyl tragedy. Glasnost means openness. On December 10, 1984, Gorbachev emphasized promotion of glasnost in a speech saying, "An inalienable component of socialist democracy is glasnost. Broad, timely, and frank information is testimony of faith in people, of respect for their minds and feeling."
Media, the fax machine, the computer were opening up the USSR. Gorbachev and the Politburo watched satellite TV in their offices. After Olympic boycotts, the 1986 Goodwill Games were seen live both sides of the Iron Curtain.
Gorbachev wrote that, "We want more openness in public affairs in every sphere of life. Truth is the main thing. People should know what is good and what is bad too. Citizens could travel more freely, which enabled them to contact people abroad for funds to support nationalist groups emerging within the USSR. Gorbachev's plan for limited freedom severely backfired. He learned that there was no middle road. Reforms would either be stopped or otherwise continue until they killed communism from within. Gorbachev intended to seamlessly integrate reform into Soviet culture. His goals were essentially very westward-based, the most noted being demokratizatsiya, or democratization of society. Gorbachev faced indifference from the majority of citizens and an oppositional uproar from the ruling elite, including members of the Politburo and secretaries of the Central Committee. Nationalist parties started emerging in satellite states, the Rukh in Ukraine and the Birlik in what is now Turkey. In 1990, Gorbachev spoke to abolish the Communist Party's monopoly of power, create a presidency position in government, and create a multi-party system. The Union began to split, communist ideals to deteriorate.
He didn't understand that having taken one step, glasnost, democracy, human rights, you can't stop there.
The attitudes within the USSR ranged from complete acceptance of perestroika to complete outrage and changes the policy entailed. In a 1993 interview, Gorbachev explained, the party bureaucracy, the ministries, and all the feudal lords were resisting. Even the industrial bosses and the managers were afraid of losing their power. His policies were targeted as anti-Soviet and insulting to the history and legacy of the Communist Union. Gorbachev later commented, on the basis of a lie, the officials would seize power and use it for their own ends.
You have to take the next steps, right up to the complete destruction of the old system. He wanted to keep the old system and remain the sole person in charge, but that just wasn't possible.
Just like Gorbachev had intended, Soviet citizens embraced the new freedoms. However, they did so to the point where all socialist ideals were overshadowed. Protesters started to speak up in the Baltic states in 1986, beginning in Latvia with the Human Rights Defense Group, also known as Helsinki 86. Soon after, the demonstrations started springing up all across the satellite states. Ukraine, Moldavia, and Belarus each developed national political parties that were anti-communist. On August 23, 1989, in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, 2 million people joined hands to form the Baltic Chain, spanning 600 kilometers, to testify that the repression from the USSR must end. By 1990, the USSR had released 6 of the Baltic satellite states. Then, in August 1991, Communist Party members resorted to a coup d'etat to try to forcefully remove Gorbachev from power. Afterwards, the remaining 10 satellite states became free nations. The USSR had finally broken, as had Gorbachev's stature in the eyes of the Soviet people. In the coming months, Gorbachev's power would continue to be tested until it would eventually falter.
And Russian flags still fluttered side by side above the Kremlin. But Mr. Gorbachev finally brought the curtain down on the Soviet Union and his own extraordinary career.
Compatriots, due to the situation which has evolved as a result of the formation of the Commonwealth of Independent States, I hereby discontinue my activities at the post of President of the USSR.
The manner of his departure reflected the nature of his rule. The Kremlin, so long the forbidden city of the Soviet Empire, opened its doors to the world. Mr. Gorbachev quit live on satellite TV.
This society has acquired freedom. It has been freed politically and spiritually, and this is the most important achievement that we have yet to fully come to grips with.
Mikhail Gorbachev had resigned the position of being General Secretary of the Soviet Union. In his absence, Boris Yeltsin had gained popularity amongst citizens because, unlike Gorbachev, he had a grand strategic objective. It was to abolish the Communist Party, dismantle the Soviet Union, and make Russia into an independent, democratic capitalist state. The night of Gorbachev's resignation, the Russian tricolor was raised above the Kremlin. The Soviet flag was lowered for the last time. The turnover had been quick, but very far from quiet. With a new leader paving a road to the 21st century, the Soviet Union split into now independent, revitalized nations. Today, Gorbachev is often viewed as a political failure. This would be true if he is considered a leader who had intended to continue communist ideals.
The man who changed the world, but who lost an empire.
Gorbachev is one of the towering figures of the last half-century because of what he achieved in changing a nation by the force of his own will and determination.
With a new leader paving a road to the 21st century, the Soviet Union split into now independent, revitalized nations. Today, Gorbachev is often viewed as a political failure. This would be true if he's considered a leader who had intended to continue traditional Soviet ideals. He never imagined the Union would crumble beneath his feet. He aimed to heal a suffering country. Instead, Gorbachev brought forth a free market economy and initiated a liberated society, a turning point that will forever be remembered in Soviet history.